Tavish Part 1, Formation and Structure of the United Nations, U.N.O. The United Nations, U.N.O., is an international organization formed to maintain peace and security worldwide, foster friendly relations among nations, and promote social progress, better living standards, and human rights. Formation of the U.N.O. 1. Foundation. The idea of the U.N.O. was conceived during World War II, as nations sought a platform to prevent future conflicts. In 1942, representatives of 26 countries signed the Declaration by United Nations to fight against the Axis powers. 2. The UN Charter, drafted at the Dumbarton Oaks Conference in 1944. Finalized and adopted during the San Francisco Conference on April 15, 1945. The Charter officially came into force on October 24, 1945, now celebrated as UN Day. 3. Membership, started with 51 member countries. Bangladesh became the 136th member on September 17, 1974. 4. Key achievements. The UN won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1988 for peacekeeping efforts, and 2001, shared with Kofi Annan, then Secretary General. Played critical roles in decolonization, like in South Africa, 1974 to 1994, and peace efforts in Palestine, 1947 to 1948, and Namibia, 1978 to 1982. Structure of the UNO. The UNO operates through 6 main organs. 1. General Assembly, the central deliberative body where all member states have equal representation, discusses and makes recommendations on global issues. 2. Security Council, responsible for maintaining international peace and security. Has 5 permanent members, P5, USA, UK, Russia, China, France. Includes 10 non-permanent members elected for 2 years. 3. Economic and Social Council, SOSOC, oversees global economic, social, and environmental issues. Coordinates with specialized agencies like the World Health Organization, WHO. 4. Trusteeship Council, established to oversee the transition of colonies to independence. Inactive since 1994, after Palau became independent. 5. International Court of Justice, ICJ, based in The Hague, Netherlands. Settles legal disputes between states and gives advisory opinions. 6. Secretariat, administers the day-to-day work of the UN, headed by the Secretary General, currently Antonio Guterres. Role in world peace. The UNO has played a vital role in 1. Peacekeeping missions, deploying forces to conflict zones to stabilize regions. 2. Conflict resolution, mediating disputes between nations. 3. Humanitarian aid, assisting refugees and victims of natural disasters. Part 2 will discuss intergovernmental agencies related to the UN and their contributions to global... Not Part 2. Intergovernmental agencies related to the United Nations. The United Nations works closely with specialized intergovernmental agencies to achieve its goals in areas like economic development, health, food security, labor rights, and international cooperation. Key agencies and their contributions. 1. United Nations Development Program, UNDP, established to fight poverty, promote development, and assist nations in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. 2. International Labor Organization, ILO, founded in 1919, became a UN specialized agency in 1946, works to promote fair labor standards and social justice. 3. Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, created on October 16, 1945 in Quebec, Canada, focuses on eradicating hunger, improving agriculture, and ensuring food security. 4. World Health Organization, WHO, established on April 7, 1948, celebrated as World Health Day, monitors public health, combats diseases, and ensures health standards globally. 5. World Food Program, WFP, provides food assistance to combat hunger, played a crucial role during wars, famines, and natural disasters. 6. International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank, IBRD, both created during the Bretton Woods Conference, 1944, IMF supports global financial stability, while the World Bank funds development projects in poorer nations. 7. United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, formed in 1946 to provide emergency aid to children after World War II. Focuses on education, health, and child rights. 8. International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, established in 1944. Chicago Convention, develops global aviation standards and ensures air transport safety. 9. International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, promotes peaceful use of nuclear energy while preventing its misuse. Other contributions of the UN system. 1. Environmental protection, through initiatives like the United Nations Environment Program, UN, addressing issues like climate change and biodiversity. 2. Trade and economy. Agencies like the World Trade Organization, WTO, and United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNTAD, promote fair trade and economic cooperation. 3. Human rights. The UN Human Rights Council works to protect freedoms worldwide. Challenges and achievements. The UN and its agencies have made remarkable progress in reducing global poverty, improving health, and resolving conflicts. Challenges include political disagreements, funding issues, and addressing global crises like climate change and pandemics. The combined efforts of these agencies ensure that the U.N.O. remains a cornerstone of international peace, development, and cooperation. The United Nations, UN, has been criticized for being ineffective or dead in some aspects, but this doesn't tell the full story. While it has limitations, it still plays a critical role in many areas. Let's explore its strengths and weaknesses. Why people think the UN is dead. 1. Failure to prevent conflicts. Ongoing wars like those in Ukraine, Syria, and Israel-Palestine highlight its inability to enforce peace in high-stakes geopolitical conflicts. The Security Council, where the veto powers of 5 permanent members, US, Russia, China, UK, France, often result in gridlock, is seen as outdated and dysfunctional. 2. Lack of enforcement power. The UN often relies on member states to enforce its resolutions. If powerful nations ignore its mandates, there is little the UN can do. 3. Inefficiency and bureaucracy. Accusations of corruption, bloated administration, and slow response times to crises have diminished its reputation. 4. Erosion of multilateralism, growing nationalism and countries prioritizing self-interest over global cooperation, e.g. U.S. withdrawal from agreements like the Paris Accord during the Trump era, undermine its authority. 5. Emergence of regional powers and organizations. Nations and regional alliances like BRICS, NATO, and ASEAN increasingly act independently of the UN. Why the UN still matters. 1. Humanitarian aid. Agencies like UNICEF, WFP, and WHO provide critical assistance during disasters, pandemics, and conflicts. For example, the UN led efforts to distribute vaccines during the COVID-19 pandemic. 2. Global agreements. The Paris Climate Agreement, Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and treaties on nuclear weapons and biodiversity were brokered under the UN's umbrella. 3. Peacekeeping missions. Despite challenges, UN peacekeepers stabilize regions like South Sudan, Congo, and Mali. 4. Platform for dialogue. The UN provides a stage where countries can engage in diplomacy, even if they disagree elsewhere, addressing emerging issues. Initiatives on topics like climate change, artificial intelligence, and global inequality show its adaptability to modern challenges. What needs fixing? 1. Security Council reform. Expanding permanent membership or limiting veto powers could make it more representative and functional. 2. Strengthening accountability. Holding nations accountable for violating international laws and resolutions. 3. More equitable leadership. Giving more voice to smaller or developing nations rather than letting global powers dominate. 4. Enhanced crisis response. Speeding up humanitarian and peacekeeping efforts. Is the UN dead? The UN is not dead, but it's definitely struggling to adapt to a more divided and multipolar world. While its political influence may have waned in certain areas, its role in development, humanitarian aid, and global cooperation remains irreplaceable. The organization reflects the challenges of the global system itself: complex, messy, but essential. Yes, you did include most favored nations, free trade, and sanctions in your original prompt about the UNO and its functions. Let me explain these terms in the context of international relations and their connection to the UN and global trade. Most favored nation, MFN. 1. What it means. The most favored nation, MN principle, ensures that a country must treat all its trading partners equally under trade agreements. For example, if a country lowers tariffs on goods from one nation, it must apply the same rules to all other countries in its trade agreements. 2. Connection to the UN. While MFN is primarily a concept under the World Trade Organization, WTO, the UN supports the principle through its emphasis on fair global trade. The WTO itself is an intergovernmental agency that aligns with the UN's goals of fostering cooperation and reducing inequality. 3. Significance. MFN promotes stability and predictability in international trade, reducing discrimination and fostering economic growth. Free trade. 1. What it means. Free trade refers to the unrestricted exchange of goods and services between countries without tariffs, quotas, or other barriers. It aims to maximize economic efficiency and global cooperation. 2. Connection to the UN. The UN, through organizations like UNTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, promotes free trade as a way to support developing economies and reduce global poverty. UN-supported free trade agreements often aim to ensure that smaller, less developed countries benefit fairly from global commerce. 3. Challenges. Free trade agreements can sometimes favor wealthier nations or corporations, leading to criticisms of inequality and exploitation. Sanctions. 1. What they are. Sanctions are penalties or restrictions imposed by one or more countries or the UN on another nation to influence behavior or policies. These can include trade restrictions, financial limitations, or travel bans. 2. Connection to the UN. The UN Security Council often enforces sanctions as part of its role in maintaining global peace and security. For example, the UN has imposed sanctions on countries like North Korea and Iran to curb nuclear proliferation or punish violations of international law. 3. Types of sanctions. Economic sanctions, limiting trade or access to financial systems. Arms embargoes, prohibiting the sale of weapons to specific nations or groups. Travel bans, restricting movement of leaders or individuals. 4. Effectiveness. Sanctions can pressure governments but may also harm civilian populations, leading to debates about their humanitarian impact. Conclusion? These concepts, MFN, free trade, and sanctions, highlight the interconnected nature of international relations. While free trade aims to promote cooperation and economic growth, sanctions are tools for enforcing compliance and addressing violations of global norms. The UN plays a vital role in balancing these mechanisms to achieve peace, security, and equitable development. If you'd like, I can provide specific examples of these in action.